Hello and welcome. This video is going to be all about the evolution of Art the Clown. Terrifier 2 has become one of my personal favorite movies in general, especially horror movie, especially comedy, because there's a lot of comedy involved. Now, I love horror movies. I have watched them since I was a kid, probably watched a lot of movies I really shouldn't have, but that's okay, I turned out fine. And I do not like blood and guts and torture movies. Having said that, yes, Terrifier and Art the Clown is still one of my favorite characters, even though I don't like the gross stuff. It's just my opinion, don't come at me, bro.
Oh God! Come at me, bro!
And I'm going to explain a little bit about the story of Terrifier 2 without giving it away, so it's spoiler free. I have included timestamps, so if you want to skip ahead to something, please look at the timestamps, see where you want to go, and I got it all set up for you. I'm sure you've heard of Art the Clown, or you've probably seen the memes, probably seen some things with bleach and salt, and that does come into play in Terrifier 2. So if you have the idea that he's a serial killing clown, well, you're right, but there's much more to it. And so if you are also unsure if this movie is for you, if you do like horror,
I don't know if I like it.
I'm going to explain why I like it in spite of that. And honestly, this probably has more blood in one scene than the elevator scene in The Shining. Art the Clown was actually featured in other movies before Terrifier 2 and before Terrifier, so we're going to start from the beginning. He was actually featured in a short called The Ninth Circle from 2008, directed by Damien Leone. This is actually the first showing of Art, and he looks very different in this version. He actually looks a little more like Crazy Joe Davola from Seinfeld than the Art the Clown we know nowadays. I'm just going to give you the gist for the short. A woman is drugged and kidnapped by Art the Clown while waiting for a train. When she awakens, she finds two other women held captive. Now, some things happen. I'll skip to the end. She's eventually surrounded by hooded people, and I'm not going to go into detail, but it's obvious that she's going to be violated by Satan.
That's pretty dark, yeah. That's dark. Yeah, it's pretty dark.
So yeah, that's the short. There you go. Now, the first movie I saw Art in was in Hallows Eve from 2013, and it's really a combination of different short stories combined to make this one film. It starts out, there's a woman babysitting a boy and a girl, 11-ish years or so of age, and the boy mentions that someone left a VHS tape in his bag when they went trick-or-treating. And against her better judgment, she allows the kids to watch a movie with her as long as she's there. The first episode is actually The Ninth Circle, and after that, she sends the kids to bed, but she watches the movie by herself, which I'm sure she regrets. There's a couple other stories. One woman is being harassed in her home by an alien, which is actually kind of goofy, but I have this irrational fear of aliens that kind of struck a chord with me, so there were some scary parts in there for me anyway. The third story is about a costume designer who has a run-in with Art. And, I always wonder why the clown looked different in the beginning of the movie as compared to later on, because, that's his very first appearance. That was years apart. And then later on, he looks similar to the Art that we see in Terrifier 2 with the protruding cheekbones and the big hook nose. Now, the ending does have a little bit of a surprise, only because I didn't expect it to involve kids like they do. I'm trying not to give too much away, but you don't usually see kids affected like that in horror movies. But just remember, everybody's fine. They're all actors. Everybody's okay. But also, it's a little different because a different actor portrayed Art. David Howard Thornton plays Art in Terrifier and Terrifier 2, and I'm not saying that the other guy who played Art in the other movies did anything bad. I mean, it's just David Howard Thornton's really good. Okay, now we'll move on to Terrifier 2016, directed by Damien Leone. It starts out, there's a small retro TV on the floor, and on the screen we see a reporter conducting an apparent interview with a woman with a facial disfigurement, a severe facial disfigurement.
You think so?
She's lost the flesh on her face and only has one eye, her nose is missing, and her lips appear to be gone. Now, watching this, the first thing my mind went to was chimpanzee attacks. Now, back when I was a kid, and I don't know, it seemed to happen a lot when I was a kid, but I think it just happened once, and maybe I just remember it so vividly.
That was a traumatic childhood.
I've learned that chimps will eat the faces of their victim. I know that's creepy, and I'm sorry, but that's what this reminded me of. So anyway, we see someone walking up to the TV. We can't see who it is, but he's wearing big clown shoes, so yeah, that's probably Art. After the reporter asks the disfigured woman if she thinks the murderer, who also attacked her, known as Art the Clown, is alive or dead. And the woman says he's dead because she saw the body. Then we see him kick the TV screen and it shuts down. Something I've learned about Art is that he gets very upset if people think he's dead. Now we see him sitting at a table applying makeup, clown makeup, obviously. And the scene is spliced together with clips of Art assembling his nasty, rusty weapons made from blades and jagged metals and scalpels. God, the scalpels, that's just awful. Especially when he makes a whip out of them. My God, that's terrible. So the scene now takes us to the reporter after the interview in her dressing room. She's on the phone talking, and she thinks she hears someone in her wardrobe. So she hangs up and goes to investigate, and eventually she is attacked by the disfigured woman. Obviously, I can't show much. Again, YouTube will get me. But I will tell you, she's pretty messed up. Now, by the way, the woman who plays the reporter also played the babysitter in All Hallows Eve. It's not the same character, but the same actress, so that's a little Easter egg for you there.
I don't know, to learn something?
You learned something.
Now we're introduced to Dawn and Tara. Tara's the dark-haired one, Dawn's the blonde one. And they're walking home from a Halloween party. Tara is wearing a skeleton-like costume, and Dawn is wearing a scarecrow costume. And what's funny is in the ninth circle, there's also a girl in there for just a minute or two. She's also dressed as a scarecrow. And in Terrifier 2, a little girl comes up trick-or-treating dressed like a scarecrow.
And if you only had a brain.
Then they spot a man in a black and white Victorian clown outfit holding a big garbage bag over his shoulder. So this obviously alarms Tara. Dawn isn't really too bothered by it. She actually yells at the guy, "Hey, my friend wants your number." And so Tara yells, "Sorry, she's drunk," but as she looks up, the clown has disappeared. So since the two women are too drunk to drive, they decide to eat at a nearby diner. As they both sit down, Art the clown comes in with his big plastic bag and sits down at a table across from the friends. And he just stares at Tara, just her, and eventually starts making funny faces and gives this incredibly creepy black smile. He stares at her and only her, no matter what. Even her friend Dawn gets up and sits on his lap and takes a selfie. He doesn't even look at Dawn until she pulls his hat down and it flies back into his face. Then he looks at her. Well, eventually, Art buys Tara a ring from a gumball machine, using the change left for a tip on another table, but it's the thought that counts, right? I mean, that's kind of sweet. Eventually, Art is tossed out by the diner staff for smearing his own excrement on the bathroom wall. That's his thing, that's what Art does, he does it again, he writes his name in his mess. Dawn and Tara make their way back to the car, only to discover that the car has a flat tire. And Tara suggests that maybe the creepy guy slashed her tires, because honestly, that's what I would think too, but I'm also paranoid. Tara uses Dawn's phone to call her sister, Victoria, to come pick them up. In the meantime, Tara has to use the restroom, and instead of just, popping a squat, as she says, in the alleyway, she decides to ask a custodian who is outside smoking if she can use the facilities.
Or spend 6 months in a correctional facility.
And so it turns out the restroom is nastier than the alleyway. She should have stuck with the alleyway, but she's inside the building now. So the guy leads her to the bathroom, but says, "You can find your own way out, right?" And she goes, "Yeah, I can figure it out." Well, eventually we run into this woman called the Cat Lady in the credits. She doesn't have cats. We see her with one cat. That does not equate a cat lady. But she does have a doll she treats like her child, so they probably could call her the doll lady. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Eventually, the two friends are separated, and again, I can't go into detail because of YouTube standards, but if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. When I say the scene from Terrifier, you know what I'm saying if you've seen it. Now, if you haven't seen it, but wondering what I'm talking about, I will put up this illustration here, except Patrick actually has clothes on. He grabs a rusty hacksaw, and that's all I can say. That's all I can say about that. So Dawn is gone. She's split. She hung around too long. She was torn. I'm sorry. It's not funny. I'll stop. It's not funny. Kind of giving you the gist of the fate of these women here. So again, spoilers. Dawn is dead. Tara is dead. The cat lady is dead. And Victoria is still fighting for her life, trying to escape Art. Now there is a scene eventually where Victoria stabs Art in the eye with something, and she gets away from him. This was after he attacked the custodian. There's another guy that shows up too, but it's not necessary to the story, so I'll skip him. I'm sorry. But there is a scene where Victoria gets this one area, and Art just takes out this little horn and just starts aggressively honking it at her. So that's near the end. Now the movie ends with the cops showing up, and they discover Art chewing on Victoria's face as she lies motionless on the ground. The cops draw their guns, and Art has his gun. By the way, his wild card is the gun. It's very surprising. After all we see him do with rusted old tools, he pulls out this gun. So Art looks annoyed. He's like, "Okay," and he takes his gun and opts out. So then we see a man and woman bring two cadavers, supposedly Art and one of his victims, to the morgue. They quickly explain the situation to the coroner, that it was a murder-suicide, and as they leave, the coroner decides to look who's in the body bag to see who caused all this havoc. Once the coroner is left alone, lights go out, and we hear screaming and voices and noises coming from the stereo and from the phone. Lights flicker on and off. Eventually it stops, the lights turn back on, and everything's back to normal, and Art's arm flies up and starts choking the coroner. Poor guy. And at this point, obviously, I realized, okay, this is supernatural. I thought maybe this was just some crazy guy dressing up as a clown and killing people, but no, we're dealing with something supernatural.
Supernatural? No, supernatural.
Then the film skips ahead a year. We see a man and woman talking to a doctor while another woman is sitting in the wheelchair between them. And we don't get too much information other than the woman has been there for a year recovering. And as the man is wheeling the woman in the wheelchair out, we hear the doctor say, "Good luck with your interview later today." So this is Victoria. So obviously we know earlier on that Tara was killed, but I kind of figured that Tara was going to be the final girl, that she was going to be the one coming out. Obviously, halfway or so we realize that's not going to happen. It's probably just me. I got so confused about the timeline, but in Terrifier 2, seeing this movie compared to Terrifier, I personally get the timeline a little better, and of course, that just may be me. Alright, so now I get to talk about Terrifier 2, which is my favorite out of all these movies. Terrifier 2 was released in 2022 and directed by Damien Leone. And of course, we have David Howard Thornton, who made Art. I mean, he made Art what it is, I should say, with his acting. Terrifier 2 picks up exactly where Terrifier left off, and in this scene, Art really looks terrifying. I mean, he can be creepy in some of the scenes, but in this scene, he really looks terrifying. And the way this movie mixes in comedy with blood and horror is actually pretty good. Art sees himself in the mirror, he notices eyes missing, he's got this hole in the back of his head. He still manages to write his name in the mirror in blood, at least it's not fecal matter this time.
Look on the bright side!
And eventually we learn how he reassembles himself, apparently, because he took the eye from the coroner and popped it in his own head. So I can't show all that I would like to show because, you know, YouTube standards have to remove a lot.
Maybe the missing scene was a love scene.
Hopefully you're an adult and understand all this is fake. No one's hurt, fake blood, we're all good. There's actually a scene in a laundromat. Art walks in, all bloody, and there's a man asleep at the entrance. Art takes off his bloody clothes, puts some in the wash, puts in the change, sits down and reads a paper, and he's silently laughing at this article about people being killed in a car accident because he's just freaking evil. So then Art stops and he looks over, and there's this little girl sitting in the room in a clown costume just staring at him and smiling. He stares at her and she smiles and waves, and he kind of smiles and waves back. You know, that's a polite thing to do. And there's just this black fluid that's coming out from under her seat where she's sitting. I don't know why excrement is a big thing with these evil clown entities, but it is. It's there. So the little girl gets up, she walks up to Art, she starts poking at his face and his new eyeball, and she starts playing patty cake with him. At this point, the guy wakes up and he sees a naked, bloody Art playing patty cake with his invisible friend. Now, he should have ran out that door, and maybe he tried, but if he did, he was not fast enough. Also, the soap did a great job removing the blood stains. I mean, he could do a commercial for that. So eventually we're reduced to Sienna, her brother Jonathan, and their mom Barbara. They're sitting together having a little family meal, and eventually Sienna mentions that her brother Jonathan wants to dress up as the Miles County Killer, aka Art the Clown. Now that happened a year before. There's actually one scene where Sienna says, "You don't see people dressing up as Charles Manson or Jeffrey Dahmer, do you?"
Yes, you do.
Then the kid says, "Technically, Charles Manson never killed anybody." That boy is correct. Eventually, we also meet Sierra's friends, Brooke and Allie. Allie's the girly girl, seems really nice, and Brooke is the one who's probably a little more of a troublemaker. I like her, though.
That bitchy talk show host?
Yeah, that bitchy talk show host totally got her face torn off.
What? Hi, excuse me, can you mind your own business, please? Thank you.
And eventually they talk about what they're going as for Halloween, and Sienna is going as a character that her father would draw for her before he died. I'm going to say it takes some real skill to fabricate some suits and things like that. Like cosplayers, you have my respect. And while I wish I can put so much more in this video, I can't because YouTube will shut me down so fast, not only for the gore, but for copyright, and I'm trying not to do that to my channel right now, so it happens. But I just wanted to give you a suggestion on whether or not you should see Terrifier 2. Like I said, I'm not a blood and guts person. I adore horror. Horror is my thing. I love psychological horrors too. But to me, these movies and Terrifier 2 is just paying their respect to the 80s slasher films. And there are actually a lot of funny scenes in Terrifier 2, but there's one scene that is incredibly torturous, but to me was funny, and I don't want to give anything away, so I won't. But if you've seen this movie already, if you've already seen Terrifier 2, you know what I'm talking about when I say the bedroom scene. When you think Art is done, he comes back with salt and bleach. And it's like, that's a salty bitch move right there, Art. That was petty, but that was hilarious because it's so over the top. And there's another scene that I think is so funny where Art is at someone's house, so he's handing out candy to the kids that come to the door trick-or-treating. Art is actually holding the severed head of somebody, and this kid reaches back in the bowl to get more candy, and Art slaps his hand and slaps it away and says, "One," with his hand. "One. You only get one piece?" You know, Art's just being fair. I do agree with him on that. But yeah, as much gore as there is in this movie, this to me is really a comedy, you know, because there are so many funny parts with Art the Clown. So you may disagree with me, I'm sorry, but there are a lot of hilarious parts. And that's really why I love the Terrifier series, is because of Art. Of course, we owe a lot of that thanks to the actor David Howard Thornton, who did a great job as portraying the silent killer clown. David had mentioned in an interview that some of his favorite actors were silent film stars, like Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and Mr. Bean. And I never really thought of Mr. Bean as a silent film star, but now I will. So that was my take on it. And if you love horror and you love comedy, I think you'll love Terrifier 2 especially. There's a lot of humor in it, and I personally really enjoyed it. Honestly, it's really a comedy horror movie. Hopefully there'll be a third installment, and I really hope that they give a little bit of a background to Art, but not too much because less is more. I'm really interested in who the pale girl is, and if they want to tie up some loose ends, I'm 100% fine with that. But like I said, leave a little bit of mystery to Art, in my opinion. And let me know what you thought of it. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Bye.